Exodus chapter 20, Israel has reached Mount Sinai. God is giving a written law to them for the first time, and the beginning of that law includes what we call the Ten Commandments. They are the basis for everything else that's going to come under the Mosaic Law. They're the basis for everything that Jesus is going to teach in the Gospels. They're the basis for everything that we believe. We know them. We see God open with, "You will have no other gods before me. I am God." And then in reference to tonight, he gets down to verse 8, and he says, "Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy." That's all he has to tell us. He's already explained the beginning. Oh, Sandy, don't rush me. That's the name of it. Sandy got on to me when I quit putting PowerPoints up. I quit giving a title, and she takes these copious notes, and then she gets home and she realizes that I don't know what this one's named. And I constantly have to go back to her and, hey, what did I say? And she can't find it because I didn't give her a title because there wasn't one to begin with. So "Don't rush me" is the title. He's already given us back at creation that he created the world in 6 days and he took a Sabbath day off. So he doesn't have to go any deeper in Exodus 20. But he does. "Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. 6 days you'll labor and do your work. On the seventh you're going to rest." Again, he could stop there. But verse 11, he goes a little farther. And he says, "For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth. And then on the seventh he rested." Why the repeat? Why the extra information? We're going to come back to that in a little bit, but file it away. Put that peg there because we're going to hang some things on it in just a minute. I came up with the title "Don't Rush Me" because I have a Snoopy shirt that says "Don't rush me, I'm waiting for the last minute." We are people that are notorious for wanting more time. We always need more time, and that is one of the atheists' strongest arguments. They think we need more time. We need more opportunity for those random things to bump into each other that we were talking about this morning. And so they find a rock and they decide, in all honesty, it's very arbitrary, but they claim they have their process. They claim that rock is 1 billion years old. So they've got 1 billion years to work in their theory. Well, they find another one and they decide, well, it's 2 billion years old. And so now we have 2 billion years to work in our theory. And finally, they compile all these rocks and they decide that our earth is 3.5 billion years old. And they have all of that time to make the theory work. Side note, as you read their literature, as you hear them talk on television, their dating process is flawed. Most of their dating process is based on this. All right, we found this rock and it's 2 billion years old. Well, how do you know it's 2 billion years old? Because it's on the same level as this amoeba over here that's 2 billion years old. Okay. How do you know the amoeba is 2 billion years old? Because the rock is. Well, how do you know the rock? Because the amoeba is. That's part of their dating process. The other part of the dating process is, well, since they're all in the same strata, they have to be the same age. Okay. How did the sea creatures get on the top of the highest mountain we have on the face of the earth? God turned our world upside down in Genesis 6. He threw any idea of strata and rock formations completely out the window because he disturbed the whole world. And then you can figure in the fact that if we're going to start with the supreme being who creates a full-grown world and puts people in it and it can function, that earth was aged when he created it. All right, but we want more time. We need 3.5 billion years for our theory. Time is our friend. Question tonight, is it? The answer, when you look in the evidence, is absolutely not. Laws. Everything in the scientific world is based on laws. And the second law of thermodynamics says what? Do you remember all the way back to high school? As a hint, in parentheses after the second law of thermodynamics, we usually put the law of entropy. It reads, and I wrote it down exactly as it reads so that I don't mess it up. As one goes forward in time, the net entropy, which is the degree of disorder in our world, the net entropy of an isolated closed system will always increase. Shortened version, the more time you have, the more random our world gets. The more chaos there is. An evolutionist thinks he wants time. I promise you, he does not. Time equals chaos. We break down that definition. All right, we want time, okay? You want 3.5 billion years. I'll give it to you. What happens over 3.5 billion years? Entropy, or the degree of disorder in our world, does what? If there is no outside force, if we're in a closed system where there's no superpower on the outside working on the system and keeping it together, it flies farther and farther apart. More and more disorder. It does not create. It does not bring together. As our universe continues to expand, and it does, the randomness increases. Let me explain it to you. Visually, like we did with the basketball this morning. I take 15 people, say I take the first 15 here in these pews, and I put them in a closet. It's a big enough closet to get them in, so it's obviously not my closet. It's a Hollywood person's closet. Okay. And then they have to move blindfolded in the dark at supersonic speed in this closet. Is there a good chance they're going to bump into each other? All right, what if I take those same 15 people and I put them on a football field with more time in between them and their traveling distance? Are they going to bump into each other as often? No. Now we put them in a universe and they move at supersonic speeds. By the way, we have to figure in the fact that a big bang and explosion pushes them away from each other. How often are they going to bump into each other? They want all these random chances. These things got to bump into each other absolutely constantly for 3.5 billion years, and yet from the beginning they've been moving apart. Time's not your friend, atheist, because time creates distance. And distance creates chaos and randomness. Things aren't coming together. They're getting farther and farther apart. And in that book I was telling you about that Marty loaned me, they used an illustration like you take red, white, and blue confetti and you drop it from an airplane. What are the chances that it's going to form the American flag on your front lawn? I thought about alphabet soup. You take alphabet soup and you pour it out at a distance where the can is touching the plate, you might get it to spell if or of or and. Is it going to spell supercalifragilisticexpialidocious? No. What if I pour it out of an airplane? What if I pour it from the moon? What are the chances? They didn't get better, did they? Time that it has to fall and distance that it has to fall makes it less likely. 3.5 billion years does not help the atheist cause. What happens if Greta plants her garden and decides to leave it for 6 months? She never tends it. It's a closed system. She never weeds it. What if Johnny does? Do you have a garden when you come back? No, you have a field. You have brambles and briars and weeds and rodents. You do not have a garden. When we're left to our natural state, without God controlling it, it's chaos. And that's true in every area of our lives. How many, because it's not going to be the young kids anymore, how many of you remember reading Lord of the Flies? What happens when we get into a closed system with nobody taking care of us and instructing us? We turn into wild animals and we kill each other. If you don't believe me, take the law out of a city for about 5 minutes and see how long it takes people to start looting. Why? Well, because our closed system has told us that we're wild animals. And so when we take God, the controlling agent, out of it, we go nuts. So you take God, the controlling agent, out of creation and let it become a random thing, our system goes nuts. We don't create anything. It simply destroys itself. Time kills evolution. Time murders the evolutionary theory. And I mentioned this morning, when they get down to being honest, you know, they have to admit that randomness really couldn't happen. There had to be some type of miracle. What they will not admit is that time is their enemy. That is the one thing that they will hold on to. You just give me enough time and chance will take over. So what about my faith? Well, my faith says that there's an outside force working on this system. Genesis 1, in the beginning, God. In the beginning, God began to put things in motion and He controlled them from the beginning. And in 6 days, I said we'd come back around to that peg that we hung up in Exodus 20. And in 6 days, He was done with it. On the 7th, He rested. And then Colossians chapter 1 and verse 17, in Him all things continue to hold together. Continue to be consistent, to have a system to them. Is that a step I can take? Absolutely. Because the science gets me up to the point that there are living creatures in this world and everything functions exactly like we're supposed to. We're not flying off the earth. We're not crashing into the sun. And it's not, in that sense, getting more chaotic. Something put it there and something's holding it together. My faith allows for that. Now, this is what's so cool. Why 6 days? God spoke into the darkness and there was light. God spoke and the waters came into existence. God spoke and the animals. Why 6 days? God could have been done in the blink of an eye. He could have had 6 days, 23 hours, 59 minutes, and 59 seconds for His Sabbath if He'd have wanted it. Because He could have been done with one spoken word. Why 6 days? Number one, to His glory. Number two, so that we have evidence in our pocket. Exodus chapter 20. Why does God explain the 6 days? He is giving us information that we take back to Genesis 1 that explain to us what 6 days means. God, you worked for 6 days and took a Sabbath off, so how many eons is that? many eons and billions of years did it take you to create, and how many eons and billions of years did you take off on your Sabbath? They didn't ask that question. Why? Because they understood what God was talking about. He's talking about 6 days in the garden. Linguistic note, by the way, the word day in Hebrew is the word yom. Without exception, there is nowhere in the written world that the word yom has a number with it, and it means anything other than a 24-hour literal period. We've got 6 days in the garden. Why is that important? How does that point to God's glory? Because when Adam is made on day 6, the earth is 5 days old, plus however long in that day God chooses to wait before He creates Adam. How old is the earth when Adam is out of the garden and his wife gives birth to Seth? It is exactly 130 years old. Why? Because that's how old Adam is. Adam began to age the day he's born. All of that points to God's glory, and it puts evidence in our pocket, because if you start there and you add it up, what did we do at the end of last year with our mail out? You get a 6,000-year-old earth that exactly fits the timetable that the atheists don't want you to see. So, number one, they don't want a 3-billion-year-old universe. Number two, God took it away from them from the beginning, because He said, I don't need it either. A few weeks ago, I mentioned to you John Clayton. And I said, don't go read his modern stuff. That's why. He took what brought him to God in his existence, and he tried to combine it with years of his pseudoscience, and he decided that God created and then let it all evolve, and he has to have eons in the Garden of Eden. John, they're not there. He even made the statement, the Bible doesn't tell us how old the earth is. Well, it may not say on page 365, paragraph 2, that it's blah, blah years old, but he sat there and added it all up for us, starting with the age of the first man that came on the 6th day. Time is not the evolutionist's friend. Let's close with this. We started with the question this morning. Can life come from non-life? I actually toyed with jokingly the idea of standing up in the pulpit, asking that question, and then saying no and sit down. Because that's the answer. I've gone a long way today to say no. Non-life cannot produce life. It defies every law in the book as far as science is concerned. And it defies rational thought. It doesn't make sense. We understand that. If I want a puppy for my kids, I do not sit on my couch and stare at the floor and hope a puppy pops out of the sky. I go somewhere where there are already 2 dogs, as God said, and kind produces kind, and I get the dog that comes from that union. Life produces life. That chair will sit here until the end of time if nothing happens to it, and it's not going to pop out another chair. It just can't happen. It makes no sense. So don't insult my intelligence. So the second question, is there enough faith in this world for me to be an atheist? No, because there's absolutely no evidence of it at all. I want to end with this thought. When our scientists search for extraterrestrial life, what are they looking for? Well, they set up satellites and stuff because they're looking for communication. They're looking for a code. So a code is evidence of intelligence. Yes. All right, the simplest code we have in an amoeba is beyond our intelligence. Oh, but that doesn't point to intelligence. Again, if you're going to make up the rules and you're going to say they're laws, you got to stick to them. If we find a code somewhere in our universe that gives us an indication there's something out there that's intelligent, I can promise you that the code we find will be so simple that it makes the amoeba and its DNA look like a genius. Creation demands a creator. And life cannot come from non-life. And in that same thought, spiritual life cannot come from non-life. It cannot come from anything but the life-giving blood of the Son of God. Lloyd and I talked about this morning. When you put a nail in evolution with the understanding that rules are rules and you can't change them, you do the same thing to denominational thought. You do the same thing to false salvation. Rules are rules. When God puts them in place, you can't change them. There is no other name under heaven whereby which men must be saved. That's it. That's a rule. It stands. He that believes and is baptized shall be saved. That's a rule, and it stands. So spiritual life only comes through the life of Jesus and nothing else. And if you don't have that tonight, you're dead. As we stand and sing.
Zion calls with the